Hello and welcome. I'm the Big Shot Critic, and today we visit Skull Island. What do you do when you're hot off the most ambitious film trilogy of all time that received universal acclaim from audiences and critics alike? Apparently, you remake King Kong. Peter Jackson did just that. His career was red hot after the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and studios pretty much worshipped the ground he walked on. I heard somewhere that he saw the original King Kong when he was 9 years old.
Oh, I sobbed when I saw the first film. I was 9 years old. Well, I can relate back to when I was a 9-year-old seeing it. I mean, when I saw the original when I was 9, I cried. That was a scene that stuck in my head ever since I saw Kong when I was 9 years old.
The original King Kong came out in 1933. It's about a filmmaking crew that goes to an uncharted island to shoot their picture. But things go wrong. The natives kidnap the leading lady and sacrifice her to Kong, the giant monkey that is only one of many extraordinary dangers on the island. But Ann Darrow, the leading lady, has a surprising effect on Kong. He treats her differently, and the producer making the movie leverages this to capture Kong and bring him back to New York, where Kong escapes and is ultimately killed by the military in what is probably the most iconic climax in cinema history. The Empire State Building was just completed, and it was the tallest building in the world. I actually bought this at the top of the Empire State Building in 2005, the same year this movie came out. So of course the monkey had to climb it. You build the tallest building in the world, and it appears in a major motion picture right after. It's just the rules. RKO, the company that made the first King Kong, wanted a sequel on the double. So the same creative team came together, cranked out a sequel called Son of Kong that was written, filmed, finished, and released less than 9 months after the original King Kong. In fact, they were both released in 1933. Can you even imagine? I mean, these were special effects heavy films. I thought the James Bond films were turned around quick in the 60s. Speaking of the 60s, great segue, right? That's when RKO licensed King Kong to Toho, the Japanese company behind Godzilla, and 2 kaiju-style movies were made, King Kong vs. Godzilla and King Kong Escapes. In 1976, the first actual remake was released, starring Jeff Bridges, if you can find him under all that hair. And remember what I said about building tall buildings? In the 1976 version, Kong climbed the Twin Towers. They weren't the tallest buildings in the world, but they were the tallest buildings in New York. The 1976 version also got a sequel in 1986 called King Kong Lives, starring Linda Hamilton. Now, if we could get a King Kong vs. the Terminator movie, that would be something. And Kong has made other appearances over the years that are honestly too frightening to mention. In the 90s, Universal started chasing Peter Jackson around trying to get him to do a King Kong remake because they heard he really liked King Kong. Things didn't work out, but surprise, surprise, after his career was red hot after The Lord of the Rings, all of a sudden the studio was able to make things happen. One wonders if the studio executive fair-weather friends of Carl Denham in King Kong are a jab at the real-life executives from Universal.
Slow down.
Is he asking for more money?
He's asking us to fund a wild goose chase. Get used to it.
King Kong is a heck of a movie, let me just make that clear. This movie is brutal, dense, and jaw-dropping. My face looked like this pretty much the whole time through. Unlike the 70s remake, Peter Jackson's remake takes place in the original 1933. The painstaking research and detail that went into recreating 1930s New York is impressive to say the least. And that artistry extends to the design and look of Skull Island. I wouldn't say that Skull Island looks real, but it always feels like it represents a real place. Does that make sense? It looks like a movie representation of a place that actually existed and we've never seen before. The reason I say it doesn't look real is because they filmed it entirely on sets, so the visual effects are overstressed, but the movie compensates by giving both New York and Skull Island a stylized veneer. So the gently stylized version of New York gives you the impression that you're also seeing a gently stylized version of Skull Island, and your mind just assumes you're seeing a representation of a real place. On top of that, the overall stylization gives the movie an appropriately mythical air that really suits the material. Someone was doing their thinking here. But the first thing that stuck out to me about this movie was the rhythm. There's bad pacing, good pacing, and rhythm. This movie has rhythm. Most mere mortals shoot for good pacing, but people like Peter Jackson can pull off rhythm. When you try to get rhythm and fail, you just end up with bad pacing, so it's hard to say how often directors actually try it. King Kong's rhythm starts right away, and it feels a little weird at first. We get really heavy dialogue in an early scene. And you're thinking, gee, for a 3-hour movie, this really jumps right in. Then you settle into it, like getting used to the throttle of a new car. Pretty soon it feels natural, and then you realize the movie is gently pushing you towards Skull Island, and that surprisingly heavy dialogue at the beginning was just the initial jolt of acceleration. The writing, editing, and dialogue join the rhythm to build a feeling of fate. The movie is pushing you to Skull Island, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And as soon as I saw you, I knew.
Knew what?
It was always going to be you.
King Kong is a tragedy. Part of the nature of tragedies is that they must be inevitable, meaning the sad ending is sad because it is inescapable, unavoidable. So the rhythm serves the feeling of fate, which serves the tragic structure. You see? Once on Skull Island, the movie keeps pushing until Anne is kidnapped by the natives, tied up, and taken by Kong. From that point on, fate seems to have done its work, and the rest of the movie simply plays out. The great irony of King Kong is that Anne was given to Kong as a sacrifice, but it was Kong who was doomed from that moment on. As the fake Arabian proverb that was made up for the original and used again in this one says,
"And lo, the beast looked upon the face of beauty, and beauty stayed his hand. And from that day forward, he was as one dead."
The fates of all the characters and the whole story hinges on that moment when Kong takes Anne. Not only was Kong as one dead from that moment on, but Carl Denham, the film producer, was doomed to face the ruin that he faces at the end of the movie. Anne was doomed to be let down by the world again, just as she feared.
Oh, I know what you're thinking. Every time you reach out for something you care about, fate comes along and snatches it away.
And Jack, the writer who falls for Anne, was doomed to only be able to save Anne from physical harm, not the emotional harm that she feared most. Another thing I noticed is that Anne is definitely the main character, but she's very passive. She hardly makes any decisions. Normally this would be bad for your main character, but when fate is so integral to your story, it must be so. Once Anne is taken, the rhythm shifts to become very brutal. The dangers and terrors of Skull Island come hard and fast for the audience as well as our heroes, and we don't get many breaks. It's brutal. By the end of it, you feel as battered and bruised as the characters in the movie. When they capture Kong and return to New York, I thought I couldn't handle another 40 minutes or whatever it is. But the rhythm shifts again. It becomes gentle and inviting, even warm. The brutality is gone, and you say, maybe I can handle another half hour, because the movie isn't beating me up anymore. So basically, Peter Jackson is pulling a classic abusive boyfriend move here. When the action does start up again, it's much more mild, and we get longer breaks. The rhythm is preparing you for the sad ending that, deep down, you know is coming. In his review for Peter Jackson's King Kong, Roger Ebert even suggested that it expanded on the ideas of the original and was the first to fully explore those ideas. And he gave particular praise to the Anne-Kong dynamic in this remake. In the original and the 70s remake, Anne's beauty alone was the basis of Kong's decision to protect her, instead of whatever he did to the previous sacrifices.
It's a bleeding boneyard. They've been ripping him from limb.
Oh, and in the 70s remake, Anne's name is Dwan. Yes. Dwan. The 70s was a different time. But in the 2005 remake, Anne is established early on as an entertainer and someone with self-respect. She's a vaudeville performer out of work. In fact, when Carl first offers her the lead role in his movie, she turns it down.
You're perfect. Look at you. You're the saddest girl I've ever met. You're gonna make them weep, Anne. You're gonna break their hearts.
See, that's where you're wrong, Mr. Denham. I make people laugh. That's what I do. Good luck with your picture.
And her self-respect is also demonstrated just before that, when she turns down the chance to make easy money by doing the 1930s version of OnlyFans. All of this plays out when she is confronted by an angry Kong who just caught her trying to escape. She does her vaudeville routine for him, which surprises him and makes him laugh, but when he pushes her for more, to the point of abusing her, she flat refuses.
I said no!
And that is why Kong treats her differently than the others. Not only does this take away the creepiness of Kong's interest, it also shows Anne to be a very strong, empathetic, and intelligent character. And to do that all in one scene is especially brilliant because the undertones of fate in the movie require Anne to be mostly passive through the rest of the movie. Genius. There's a wonderful YouTube channel called The Critical Drinker, which I will link to in the description below. The drinker often reminds us that movies have to have a reason to exist, other than money. Stories have to have a reason to be told, and this is especially true of sequels and remakes. Peter Jackson's King Kong satisfies this requirement. A good remake doesn't seek to replace the original, but to dust it off, bring it back into the public eye, and prove the timeless nature of the tale once again. Besides the refit of Kong's relationship to Anne, Jackson's version adds new side characters who bring a stronger texture. And it takes itself far more seriously than the original, which allows it to take deep breaths of drama, as opposed to the more adventurous and romantic original. On King Kong, Peter Jackson was seemingly at his prime. He was in the zone. He got great performances from his actors and amazing work from his crew. Speaking of his crew, I'm still sad Andrew Lesnie died so young. We miss you, Andrew. Guys, I give King Kong 10 out of 10 commandments. It most certainly kept the fourth one. Thou shalt keep the audience engaged. I've been giving out a lot of 10s lately. If there are any bad movies you want me to review, put them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you all. Like and subscribe for more content like this, and let me know what you thought of King Kong in the comments below. Bye-bye.